that's just a little introduction. I'm extremely grateful to be given this opportunity to share our collection with you. This is really the first time I've ever done it, and I had no idea that it was in any way special or different, because Mark and I live with our collection. We don't have any storage. We don't collect for investment, quite the opposite. We just collect what we like. And I met Audrey. Let me just show you now. Of course, at my age, I am challenged with this, but let's see if that works. It works. Yes, sure. Okay, all right. I hope that's okay. I met Audrey just recently in April, May, and it was at an exhibition at her previous location in Stamford Road, and it was for an exhibition called In Her Hands. And the reason that I went, I will go to any exhibition that is about women artists from anywhere, and I'll tell you why in a little bit. So we're new acquaintances, and of course now I feel like we've known each other for a long time. And here's Tina, another friend of mine. It was just one of my requests. Could I please meet Kumari, whose work I was interested in? And literally the next week, there I am, meeting the very famous Kumari, artist who has a studio in Bukit Batok, and had a lovely afternoon on a Sunday. Anyway, this is just to show you that Audrey and her way of operating her art gallery is extremely personable, extremely personal, and she is always very happy to introduce you to her artists, if possible. Anyway, so I will start a little bit with a personal background. So it's only relevant in that you're probably thinking, why on earth should I be why am I here in Singapore? Why am I interested in Southeast Asian art? I was actually born in Lagos in Nigeria. My father was a British engineer and my mother was Polish. And we were there for a few years before my father was posted to work in the Philippines. And they stayed there for 30 years. So that's sort of a little bit of why I've spent so much time in the region, and another 23 years here in Singapore. I've spent more than half of my life here in the region. During 1972, those of you who remember, martial law was declared in the Philippines and all the schools were closed, and I had to continue my education in Geneva, and after that I went to a women's college in Boston before going back to England to live in my own home country for the first time, and I was only there for about 18 years. I started a career in marketing and brand development. I met my husband there, and I was very lucky because I always wanted to come back home, and I married an Englishman who was very happy to come. And we set up our business here in Singapore in 2003. And it was a very difficult time because SARS was still raging. But the good news was that we were able to make a lot of deals. So everybody was very welcoming because a lot of people were leaving and we were coming and setting up a company. So when we look back in hindsight, we realize it was actually a very good time to come. We have a son. He's now 27 years old. He had all of his schooling here in Singapore, and when he left to go to university, we had what a lot of people have, an empty nest. That coincided with the beginning of COVID. My mother passed away during this time. There was a lot of loss and recalibration of what our priorities were in life. And but what it did result in was a sort of, as soon as COVID stopped and we were allowed to travel, it was like I was like a a racing dog ready to travel. And I went with my travel buddy here, Alessandra. We went to as many art-related events around the world. We used our husband's air miles very conveniently, and went as far, I think the furthest place was Sao Paulo. Alessandra's home is Brazil. And we went to the Venice Biennale, we went to Australia, the Triennale in Brisbane, and then to Sydney, Thailand. I mean, we really covered a lot of ground. And the reason I mention it is because this is when the burst of collecting happened. It was a very short, sharp period that coincided with the end of COVID and also completing my MA, which I did before COVID. Luckily, we were the last cohort before COVID closed down the colleges. And I did the program at La Salle, which they delivered together with Goldsmiths in the UK. So that's a little bit about myself. This is a health warning to all of you, because it's not really, well, I don't know how other collectors see themselves, but we don't really consider ourselves as owners of these works. We're just custodians. And what the difference is really comes through the fact that we have very deep, close relationships with the artists. I know a lot of collectors do, but I'm much more interested in using their work to amplify what they do. And I don't like to, I know I'm going to be talking about their works today, but I don't actually like to fix them to any one kind of interpretation. I'm very happy to share the work with as many people as I can. And we've embarked on some lending of the works. I started with my women's college in Boston. In October, I'm going to be hand delivering, literally in my hand luggage, 2 artworks that they are going to show for their 150th anniversary. I hope we can hand deliver them. You never know with the Trump regime whether that's going to be possible, but let's keep our fingers crossed. And I don't ever speak for them. I actually called Octora, this is Octora, I'll take you through this artwork in a little bit, to ask her permission whether I could lend her to Audrey for this exhibition. She was happy to do it, but there are always situations where you have to double check because these artists are sensitive to where they're shown. And it's as if you're asking a friend whether you can share their, private work with other audiences. So I always check in the beginning before I do that. Another gallery, I'm sure some of you are familiar with Audrey Yo from Yo Workshop, has invited me to publish a book about this collection, and that will be launched next January at Art SG. So, how did we begin? Well, here, one of my fellow docents is here, Tina Nixon, who's been a docent with the Friends of the Museum even longer than I have, but I was with them for a decade, and I started guiding at the heritage museums, and by that I mean the Peranakan Museum, the Sun Yat-sen Nanyang Memorial, the Malay Heritage before it closed. That led me then to Alessandra did the program, created the program for Gilman Barracks. I did the training for that, and then eventually, finally guided at the Singapore Tyler Print Institute, the STPI in River Valley, and then I also did the training for the National Gallery. And so it was a progression from heritage to contemporary art. And then, in the middle of all of that, there was a fabulous exhibition that Dr. June Yap, who just works down on this floor with Sam now as a senior curator, she brought the Guggenheim collection of Southeast Asian art, and it was shown at the CCA at Gilman Barracks. That sadly is now no longer there. But for me personally, it was a landmark exhibition because my husband and I always remember walking into that exhibition and seeing Tayeba Lippi's work of the bed in razor blades and Sopi Beach, his work on called Morning Glory, made out of rattan. They were breathtaking works. And why was I so struck by them? It's because I realized I had spent more than half my life here and knew nothing about its history, really. Yes, of course, the docent training introduced us to little bits and pieces, but I realized I needed to go much deeper. And that's why I went back to do an MA in Asian art histories. And by the way, the Asian art history program at La Salle, which was originally supervised by goldsmiths, now they're doing it by themselves, is the only one in the world that focuses on contemporary Southeast Asian art. Even SOAS in London, even Cornell, they're not as focused as the program here. So it's, if you're interested, it's well worth going. We have another student from that program here. I've already told you about the regional art fairs and triennials and biennials that we went to. Alessandra and I are also big fans of art outreach and going to open house and the studio visits. It all sort of came together with the MA and seeing all the work and meeting the artists, of course. So why am I interested in women artists? Well, I think it's three things. It was my education, and I think that in particular, the fact that I went to an all-women's college in 1979, this whole feminist thing just went over my head. I wasn't interested. I was more interested in meeting boys. But it sort of caught up, and as I did my studies, I realized that women artists to this day still have a difficulty in underrepresentation. When I was asked last year to give a talk on International Women's Day, I know that I was wheeled in just because people know that I am interested in women artists. But I did ask the host whether I could do a little bit of quantitative research to find out what the actual representation of women artists in each gallery in Singapore was. And they said, sure, Krystina, go ahead. And we were all surprised by the fact that if we were lucky, there were 2 galleries. This is all anonymous, so you'll have to beat me up to try and get this information. But basically, the reality is that it's much less than half. It's, if we're lucky, 1/3 of, in other words, in a gallery, there will be 1/3 representation of women artists to 2/3 male. And there are 2 galleries that are more focused on women artists, but that's the norm. And I know the reason why, and I do want to share that because it's not my idea. It's something that I've read about why women artists have this particular difficulty, and it's something that is fascinating to me because it happens to most women. And that is that with our duties, not just in conservative home bases like Southeast Asia, but even in the West, women do have still the additional responsibility of cradle to grave. And you know what I mean by that we have the children, we are responsible for the parents, we're responsible for all of this, and it puts our careers often, unless you're super women, behind the men. And we can all extrapolate what that has meant to us personally. We all have our stories, but if you look at it in the lives of women artists, it's very particular. They have to produce a body of work that is significant enough to have a solo exhibition, or indeed take part in a group exhibition. And yet at the same time, unless they are young and single or have chosen to have a life without children, they still have parents, they still have to incorporate and do all of that as well. So it's a disadvantage in terms of their careers. And it's not something that a lot of people like to talk about, but it is the reality. So I'm interested in this underrepresentation and the fact that these artists, of course, their work is what interests me. Their lives interest me as well, but I'm particularly interested in artists that talk about taboo subjects or difficult subjects coming from this region. And there are many, 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 many difficult subjects. And I will share some of them with you. What I like in particular is how they're actually quite subversive in very quiet ways at saying some things that stay with you. There have been several instances. The first was, I already mentioned, meeting Tayyaba Lippi's work, being confronted with it, just stopped me in my tracks. I get very emotional, and I promise not to cry. But these works move me enormously, and I will share them with you. So the reason that I've put, these are the artists in our collection. The reason I have them as first names is because I know them all. When I don't know them, I put the family name. So the latest work is Madeira. I don't know her, I've not met her. I've never met Jane Lee, but all the other ones, Chu Wai I haven't met. She's in exile in Paris at the moment, but I have some kind of relationship with them. It's a little bit informal, I shouldn't be doing this. This is actually the slide that comes, they're going to be appearing in the book that I'm writing next year, for publication next year. So the first one I'd like to talk about is the very first artwork that I acquired, and she is here. So this is Octora, and this is the artist herself. I met her in Bandung. It just happened that I went to the Jogja Biennale or art fair, I can't remember which, and she was staying at the same hotel, and I met her, and I'd always wanted to meet her. In fact, I had written an essay at the time that I met her at La Salle, and I checked with her whether what her work was my essay correct, and she said no. It's not, but I think she was being modest because her work is extremely deep and multi-layered, and she always focuses on historical injustices for marginalized groups. It used to be in Indonesia, but she looks very closely around her areas. So she grew up in Bandung. The key point about Octora was that in the May 1998 difficulties in Indonesia, when there were a lot of killings and rapes of Indonesian Chinese women, it affected her and her family very deeply. She did manage to finish her BA in Bandung and her MA, but she then moved to Melbourne to further her career. And that's when I met her, when she was already residing in Melbourne. I won't talk about all of the works in this detail because we only have half an hour more, but I will spend some time on this because it just shows you how I like to encounter the works. So the work on the left, Ad Infinitum, was created in 2019, and the one on the right, 2023. And I like, if I can afford it, I like to track an artist's career and see hopefully in 5-year periods what they're doing, because the interest, what they're able to do, the development is fascinating to follow. And here's a case in point. As you know, or I don't know if you know, but I had to look it up, but ad infinitum means endlessly in Latin. And what she's referring to in this artwork is the fact that the Dutch colonists in the early part of the 20th century, part of their colonial project was to record and document their colonial subjects. And in this particular instance, when she was doing her research at the Leiden University in the Netherlands, she came across the Legong dancers. If any of you have been to Bali, you will know that the Legong dancers to this day are dancing. They're early teenage girls and they do dances from the Ramayana and the sort of traditional poems and theater. And they were the subject of intense scrutiny by the Dutch for obvious reasons, because they were attractive and exotic to their eyes. But what Octora is outraged about, and why she wanted to do this project, is the fact that they have been not just badly treated in the first instance, but they are held in perpetuity, hence ad infinitum, in archives in Holland to be looked at from the West and held in this kind of scrutiny. And she felt that she could actually give them a little bit of dignity back because they're all unnamed. They were just photographed full frontal, side, and then the back, and no names, no details, just objectified. And it's not just the Dutch that did this. Part of the colonial project around Southeast Asia, a lot of the colonizers did the same thing. And what she did is, it's quite intricate what she did. It's a performance. This is a picture of herself performing, being a Legong dancer, as photographed by the Dutch in that time. And what I think becomes clear when we look at it is that they're not happy. They were not asked, and it's written on their face. Oh, and I will show you, because I called her up and I said, could you share the original documentation that inspired this work? And she said, yes, I have it. It's part of the digital collections, and it was this particular young woman that she was inspired by to do this performance. And this was some of the other images that she came across. And this headdress is something that she made, and with very great effect. But you can see all of the faces not happy. They don't like that at all. But coming back to this work here, this was, both of these I acquired from Gajah Gallery, just 2 galleries down. And Octora learned how to tuft during COVID. So this work is big. It's about this size, and it has beautiful gold thread coming through it. And what I love is it's such a simple kind of resolution to the work that she started here, where she's just showing the ignominious, sort of entrapment of these faces of these women. And here, she's sort of giving them as if they had their agency back. This is probably what they would have liked to show those colonizers. Not a lot, just their back. But it's such a beautiful work. It has the gold Ibu earring, and it's just awe-inspiring. It's beautiful, and it's tactile, and I love it. So that just gives you an idea of how I approach these works. I like to go deep, and here's another artist who I would have all of her work if I could afford it now, but I can't. Citra Sasmita. Have any of you come across her work before? She's also from Bali, and the first time I met her work was at Yo Workshop with this exhibition, Ode to the Sun, in 2020. And it's, again, another breathtaking work that you realize you're in the presence of something important. And it's Kamasan canvas, which is the traditional Balinese canvases. And she's created this hanging object and used turmeric on the floor, and that's supposed to represent the sun. And in it, she has some writing in Sanskrit of poems. But that's the only thing about it that is traditional. Everything else is not. And by that, I mean the subject matter. It's part of her ongoing work, which is called, I'm just reminding myself, Timur Mera Project. This was the 3rd iteration of it, and she's since gone on to do many more. And I didn't actually understand when I started to collect, what is it these artists have these projects? And yeah, it's because they're not done exploring these particular issues. And in this case, I was able, the first work that I acquired was this one on the left. And it's quite interesting. This is a good example of what she has done. Her ambition, I should say, is to rewrite Balinese art history foregrounding women. That sounds easy. And why should she be doing this? It's because Balinese art, traditional art, this style, has been, there are very many gatekeepers, and it starts with access to the knowledge of these traditional art techniques. The monkus in the temple don't allow women into the temple because they menstruate, and so they're not allowed access to the knowledge in the first instance. So women artists in Bali have often been restricted to doing just the frames, the patterns around the traditional kamasan frames. So in her earlier work in 2021, she's acknowledged that, but she's gone beyond that by creating some interesting subject matter called the High Priestess, which is starting to talk about her vision of women at the center of Balinese art production. We come to 2024, and she's become much bolder. If you've watched her work develop, you can see that literally she's busted out of the borders. So there's no longer any referencing of the old patterns that used to be there. She's now working with traditional found objects like from the antiques, the deer. She's introducing horsehair. And in many respects, it's not traditional, but it's sort of more traditional. And that's another of the things that I find so interesting about her, and that is that she's very articulate. She's like Yi Ilan, if you can ever listen to Citra talk, and she's on YouTube a lot, so you can access her. She has some very interesting things to say about how what the Dutch did was not just do their colonial recording project of all of these citizens, but they sort of kept the Balinese, what's the word? They exoticized what we have now, for tourists basically, for what we now know as Balian art and culture was something that really wasn't to do. She's now referring back to a previous time that is almost more authentic in that respect. So anyway, she is very controversial. She's risked a lot, and this is what I want to share with you. These artists who do this work, we come, we look, but we don't realize the sacrifices that they're making to do this. Citra is a persona non grata in her community. She is not welcomed in the local art galleries. She is no longer Hindu. She became a Muslim because things became so difficult for her. And like many of the artists in our collection, she's more famous elsewhere than in her, or celebrated, I should say, outside her own conservative home market. And this is what interests me and why I want to share these stories, because they've sacrificed a lot to be able to tell them. Here we have a Cambodian artist, Eng Rith Chandanath. It was an exhibition that Mark and I attended at Jandela Gallery in the Esplanade. And you remember I referred to that Guggenheim exhibition called No Country. In that exhibition, Sopit Beach from Cambodia was represented with his beautiful work, enormous work called Morning Glory. And it was rattan made into the Morning Glory plant. And likewise, Daneth, she's called, chose to show, using paper mache to show the lotus plant. And what I like about her representation of this plant is, if some of you know about Cambodian history, you know that they've also suffered under the Khmer Rouge in the 70s, and lost a lot of people, mostly the intelligentsia, artists, educators, lost their lives, and they're playing a big game of catch-up. And the trauma of this event is very evident in the country to this day. If you've ever been to Angkor Wat and you get into a tuk-tuk and you talk to your guide, which has been my experience, they are suffering a national trauma that is very tangible to me when I talk to these people. And anyway, coming back to Daneth's work, how she describes this is very female. She says that we all know that during this time they starved and that they had very little to eat and that they were reduced to eating lotus plants and the stems of these kind of plants. But in her case, she wants us to imagine being in the bottom of a pond with these plants, looking up and seeing the sky above. It gets terribly emotional. Because she has hope. She's a mother, and you know, she wants to share that there is hope, and that's what she likes to focus on. But I do find these works that we come across at these exhibitions, and I just would like you to spend more time looking at them and understanding what they're really all about, because they are deceptively attractive, deceptively simple, but they are packed with meaning. And I am also struck by, I always try to remember, what was I doing in 1972 or 74 when this was happening? And it's very uncomfortable to know what we were doing when this was happening just around the corner. This is a picture here on the right side of what the exhibition looked like. It was a fabulous exhibition because they paired 3 Cambodian artists with 3 Singaporean artists. And I think Mark and I bought 3 works from this exhibition because they were so, they just spoke to us. And this one is Daneth's work. Okay, so now we're moving from Cambodia to the Philippines. Isa Hoxon, does anybody know this performance artist? Whenever you see that name, and she comes to Singapore quite frequently, please go and see her performance. She's definitely one of these artists who is more well known outside of the Philippines than she is, more celebrated outside of the Philippines than she is in Manila. And why is that? For all the reasons that she speaks about. This is a performance that took place at the dance festival. I didn't go to it. It was 2019 at the Esplanade. I do have a clip, but I'm not gifted enough to play it and then come back to the presentation. So when you have time, go home and look at it. It's called Princess Parade. She's doing it with her longtime collaborator, Russ Litgas. And it's so powerful, and there's so many different levels to talk about, but she is, she's always, I'm going back, I have to get this correct, by training, she's a contemporary choreographer, and she's using her body to investigate its representation through the lens of gender and identity. And she also focuses on the service and entertainment industries. So in this particular work, Princess, she's talking about the Filipinas who go to Disneyland to work, and they work as actresses and hosts and hostesses, but they are often kept from having the roles of being Snow White or the main characters because of the color of their skin, because they have brown skin. And these roles are kept for the white actors and actresses. So she has a lot to say about that. And why I like this work is because I think There are lots of women who are nodding because we come across this kind of discrimination frequently, and not just in places like Disneyland in Hong Kong, but in our everyday lives. This work, so with performance artists, you know, it's very difficult to get an artwork because their work is ephemeral, and they perform and it's finished, and that's the point, right? You're left with a feeling and a memory. But this work, she has a very good gallerist called Columns Gallery, Mr. Dong, and he took a photo and gave it to her and said, could you create a work of art from this performance? I saw it, and having grown up in the Philippines, I had to have it because I know what's going on here. So I was raised as a Catholic in the Philippines. I went to a convent, and so this is very Catholic imagery, and it's painful. So the kind of Catholicism in the Philippines is quite painful. It's a leftover from the Spanish times, and she's actually using it to say, you know, she's borrowing from the iconography of Catholicism to show the pain. Sadly, what you can't see is that if you hold this work up to the light, there are holes that come through, so it looks like there's a halo around it. It's a really beautiful work. It's tiny, it's this small, and it's one of my favorite works. I know I shouldn't have favorites, but I really, really, really enjoy it. This work, this artist is called Madeira. Does that name ring a bell with any of you? So Madeira is interesting for many different reasons. She comes from Timor-Leste, which is the newest ASEAN country. It's still, as I understand, an observing member, but it will be granted full membership shortly. And she was a refugee. When the Portuguese left Timor-Leste, there was a lot of fighting with the Indonesian forces that came, and she and her parents fled to Lisbon, and she spent many years there before eventually emigrating to Australia, where she now lives. But she returned to Timor-Leste and stayed in a guest house. And in this guest house, she hadn't been back for many, many years. The Portuguese left in 1975, 450 years of colonization. We know that they suffered violence, including rape and pillaging by the Indonesian forces before independence in 2002. This is when she returned in 2002. And in this guest house that she was staying, in the bedroom that she was staying, at hip height, there were images of lips. These are supposed to represent lips, of lipstick marks on the wall, all around the room. And she asked her host why were they there? And you know, it is a very difficult story to tell. Once I tell you this, you will never forget it. And that's the point. And it was the lip marks of the women that were raped by the Indonesian forces. They were made to put lipstick on, kiss the wall, and raped from behind. And that's the first indignity they had to suffer. But the second, and equally difficult, is the fact that they were not allowed to share this ignominy with anybody in the community because it disrupts the harmony. And so these women who had been abused and raped were traumatized individuals. And it reminds me of so many of the other stories that I have to share with you. But it is women's fate in particular to suffer this in times of war. And Maria made this work in recognition of this suffering. Again, if you go onto YouTube, you will see her performance at the Venice Biennale last year. She was the first representative of Timor-Leste at Venice, and obviously the first woman. I think it was very brave of her government to allow her to be the representative, and I'm very hopeful. I think it's a good thing that she was allowed to show this work. It came to Singapore. I acquired it from Sundaram Tagore, and a friend of ours, Loredana Pazzini, was the curator of this exhibition. And I think that I think it was the combination of Loredana and Maria and the willingness of Sundaram to bring this work here. I thought it was very brave. And this is one of the works that I'm lending to my college and will deliver in October. Yes, Loredana was instrumental in actually showing this work in a different way. She used a paint called Raging Pink, I think, and it really brings it out. I have a problem because the curators in Boston are asking me, do they show it like this or like this? And I don't know the answer yet. We'll have to see. Imelda Cajipe Endaya. I forgot to tell you that my thesis topic was about women's art collectives and how they mediate the gendered nature of contemporary art in the region. And Imelda was the founder, is the founder of Kasibulan, which was one of the women's art collectives that I did my research on. And she's one of the Philippines' most famous living artists, and I'm so pleased to report that in her late 70s, she's still showing. She's still a force to be reckoned with. She started as a printmaker and has everything to her, many strings to her bow. Installation artist, curator, and activist. That's what makes her very interesting to me. And she, a lot of her work is advocacy work for centering women in Filipino art. Now, I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about this early work, which I acquired this work in sad circumstances, and that is that a friend of hers, the daughter of a friend of hers, put this up on Facebook and said, I need to raise money, my parents aren't well, I need to pay for their hospital care. I'm a friend of Imelda Cajipe Endaya, can anybody buy it? And I was very happy to buy it, and I met the woman and I said, I'm so sorry, I hope your parents pull through. They did pull through. And I said, again, I will just restore it for you, and you know, if you ever feel the need to have it back, please let me know. It was in a terrible state, a lot of mold, and I used Pia Josephine here, a conservator, to bring it back to this quality. Basically, any of you who've done some work in the National Gallery will be familiar with Padre Damian Domingo, who's considered one of the first Filipino artists, but in the Western style. And so the title of this is called Album of Damian Domingo, Pagina Uno, so the first page. And it's basically Imelda's commentary on the fact that these figures from Damian Domingo's sketchbooks are showing Filipinos, mestizos, wearing a combination of indigenous clothing together with the Spanish colonial bits and pieces, right? But what she's done here is shown this erasure, and what that has done is to erase what was indigenous to the Filipinos and what they've lost. And there's a lot of text down, I think, in Latin, and she's obviously making a commentary on that. This was the beginning of her work. Now she does huge murals and large pieces of work that are extremely powerful and talk much more about Filipina women across all society in the Filipinos. In the Philippines, sorry. So we're leaving the Philippines, we're coming to Singapore. This is my second to last one. We have Suzann Victor, well known to all of you, I hope, by now, who has an interesting backstory. I'm not going to talk about it because you probably know that she was banished and that performance artists were for a decade not allowed to perform in Singapore, but I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about this work that she did. This one is called Unequal Innocence. It's part of a series that she did, and I can't remember the name of the series. Oh yeah, Lens Painting Series. But what's interesting about it is that, well, first of all, Suzann was the first female artist to represent Singapore at the Venice Biennale in 2001. She wasn't the only one in that cohort. She was one of several. And she now lives in Australia. But whenever Singapore needs somebody to represent them, they ask her, which is good. This work, it came to her because one of her friends shared that her grandmother had recently reconciled with her history, that she had been a comfort woman during the Japanese occupation here in Singapore. And this idea of women having this particularly difficult time during times of war comes to me when I hear the story about this. She created these works to honor her friend and the trauma that her grandmother had endured. And how did she do it? She's using these Fresnel lenses which obscure but also show at the same time. And she did a series of these. Mine is called Unequal Innocence. And the difference is that these are not just images behind painted of her friend's grandmother. They're of black and white photographs that were circulating at the time, showing women in the region and their lives. And she had them painted onto a canvas behind these lenses. And as I said, they distort, and they're meant to make you understand that you can't trust the histories that you learn about in the school books often, and that you maybe some of the stories, the untold stories by your relatives, maybe will give you a better indication of what life was like in those times. I'm going to show you, you see that here. So you can see that there are many faces behind, but there's some burnt, sort of cauterized areas as well. And she talks about them as like being open wounds. So these stories may have happened in the past, but they're still very painful and still need to be treated like wounds that need healing to this day. And these works are really very powerful of Suzann's, and are some of her favorites. I really enjoy them. And this brings me to my last slide and to one of the works that I acquired this year when I met Audrey here at her old gallery, and that's Kumari's. These saga seeds, which you will be, these three here, are what Mark and I fell in love with. And I'm going to, you know that she's Malaysian-born Singapore artist, and she's a sculptor, but she paints as well and does installations. And I'm just going to read to you what she says about these, because I think she should have the last word. Oh, in the background, peeking out is Hansaipur, but that was part of Audrey's picture. The saga seed has been part of my life since childhood. I began collecting these seeds 30 years ago, and since then they have become central to my practice. They have appeared in installations, sculptures, and public works as enduring symbols of memory, power, and endless possibilities. What continues to move me about the saga seed is its paradoxical nature, its modest size and form. It doesn't shout for attention, but gently draws you. It represents an energy dressed in nature, pulsating with potential. In today's fast-paced world, I believe the seed offers something deeply relevant. It reminds us of the quiet power of humility. It is timeless. It bridges generations, cultures, and beliefs, from folklores to rituals to childhood games and associated personal memories. And with that, I end about our personal collection. And also to say that after the 23 years we've been here, Mark and I will be relocating to London next year. I can't imagine what that's going to be like with the weather, but we will take with us many happy personal memories. And I'm so grateful once again to Audrey for inviting me to share our collection with you. Oh, I forgot to show off. I really can't help myself, but Mark and I here were just given an award by Tatler Homes. And it's for the, I never even knew there was an award called this, but it's called the best use of art in a home. Had no idea. So we went to the dinner, and then we tried to leave because we were tired, and they said, no, you can't go. You have to stay. You're getting an award. And so we're very happy. Our son says he's never seen us look so happy. That's the picture just now. And this is the work where you can see, hopefully, some of the works you're familiar with now. The this is Tayaba Lippi, which I haven't shown you. Yi Ilan, Chandranath, Kanitha Tith, yes, and Tulip Dong. Quite a few you will see. The others are tucked away in the study. Anyway, thank you very much. And if you do, oh gosh, I was going to talk about cultural activism. Forget it. You've heard about it. And this is my Instagram. Please do follow, because this is where I will be posting things as I continue with the journey of sharing about these artists. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
It's such a great talk, and I can see it from your feedback. Everyone is so engaging. I think it's not just about the artworks, but we're also moved by the passion. Yeah. The reason I insist actually to invite Krystina to give a talk, not just showing the collection, because I was truly touched. Even the first time we met in her home, she literally introduced each of her collection to me. Yeah, I, to be honest, as a gallerist, I'm so glad to see the collector being so engaging with each of the collections, and also she's willing to make friends with each of the artists. Yeah, I think that's something not so common because there's so many different ways of collecting. Krystina is really one of the approach, but I think her story is very unique. And I really appreciate your contribution to the Singapore art scene, to the art ecosystem. Yeah, I think let's just give applause to Krystina again.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I think maybe we can turn on the computer with the slides. Maybe,
sure.
So,
okay.
We still have about 20 minutes. I think it's time to have some Q&A session. I can give the chance to the audience if anyone wants to have a question or want to share some feedback. If anyone wants to share something, otherwise I have some questions for you. Yeah. I saw many seasoned collectors here today, and I think maybe at first I can ask a question. I do kind of. I want to see how many of you have collected female artist work. If you have, maybe hands up.
Yeah.
Great. So how many of you, after hearing what Krystina shared, you are going to collect some Southeast Asian female artist work? Please hands up. Hands up. Oh yeah, I see some hands there. Okay, that means we have this talk really has some more meanings. Yeah, we are here not just to show you what our gallery has, but we really wish to promote the whole ecosystem in Southeast Asia. Even some artists is not from our gallery, from your workshop, from Gajas, our neighbors. I think we should collaborate more, and that will make Singapore more vibrant, and people will getting to know more about those very important and interesting artists. I think that's also makes a lot of sense to us. Yeah, so I'd like to maybe ask you some questions.
Sure.
Because I know Krystina and Mark, her husband, has started collecting even like 30 years ago, right? When you were in London, you were living in so many different countries. You're always going to visit the galleries, the museums, and collecting what you like. But I think maybe it's a bit different from the previous way. You collecting more like more relaxing way. But now you are shifting your approach of collecting in a very narrow down but very niche area, I would say. You focus only like the 11 countries of Southeast Asia, and mostly are female artists. How do you find the difference when it comes to you to make decision and also to give a sharing? Is there a big difference?
Well, I mean, Mark, who is obviously a big part of this whole collecting that we do as a family, has completely different area of interest. I don't want to speak for him, but I'm sure he doesn't want to speak. I'm not sure, but he's more of a modernist and enjoys, he's a product designer by trade, and that speaks to his aesthetic much more than what I'm collecting. But I'm very fortunate because we like each other's taste. And one of the things that unites this taste is the fact that we also are interested in mid-century modern furniture. And it just seems like a very good way, that's the thing that we share in common, the furniture, and he has his interest in art, I have mine, and it works. But we're always consulting each other in terms of how do we hang it, where do we hang it, should we change it? We have fun with it. And so it's a big joy. But I think what we've both learned is that the more you know about what you're collecting, the more, I mean, for instance, to prepare for this PowerPoint, it took me a long time to do because I'm not very gifted with IT, but I learned so much. I'm constantly learning. I probably got some things wrong, but you know, now to have the luxury of having time given to me to compare where Octora was and where she is now, and then to have a real opportunity to call her and say, what was your original inspiration, and to learn more, that's a gift, to keep learning. So these things are not static objects. And you know, the other thing that we've found interesting is that the conversations that you have about these artworks at home over dinner, you invite people for dinner, they look at you as if you're crazy because you have all of this thing around, and then you have a discussion about it. And before you know it, everybody has an opinion, and you've shared things, hopefully, that will inspire them to look at art in a different way. So those conversations and dialogues that these artworks have, they're never finished. They keep opening up conversations that we never imagined.
Yeah, that's true. I think I also noticed there's a very special habit, I would say, that Krystina is, she's willing to make friends, right? For each of the the artists she collected. She has met them in person, she had conversation with them, because I was accompanying her with Kumari's studio visiting, and I can see the chemical really sparked in the studio, which made me feel so proud that I introduced them. I'm like a matchmaker.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, and I finally have found someone can understand that they share so much when they meet each other, and it's really a great way to encourage the artists as well. So I also want you maybe share a bit more about why you have to meet those artists, and is that really important to you?
It is to me, but I understand that it's not for everybody, and also I don't want to speak for the artists because it's not like I'm saying, oh, go and visit all the artists, because they have work to do. This is their home. It's not their home, it's their place of work, and the time that they spend is a lot. And that's time that they take away from their own art practice. So I'm always very careful not to overstay my welcome. And if they don't want me to come, I can tell. And I don't go. I just don't go at all. And it's disappointing, but you're not going to have a very nice meeting if you're pushing yourself forward. I'm interested in their process. I'm interested in how they live. I'm interested to see what art they have. It's fascinating to me what inspires them and how they live with their art. So I don't find it unusual. I'm interested in the artists and their lives and how they live. And whenever I see them again, it's nice. It's like friends because I've been with their works, you know.
Yeah.
So I feel like I know them, but of course I don't assume to know them, presume to know them.
Yeah, but I can see sometimes it could be challenging because of the cultural background differences, and also the language could be one of the barriers sometimes. But these days the artists are very good at English.
Well, it's true. I mean, one of the things that I wanted to address in the book, and I'm pointing to Ling Wei, who's here, who is the project manager on the book and has helped enormously with the language side of things, because when we talked about the book, we know that the international language of art is English, but we don't necessarily subscribe to the fact that it should be or has to only be English. Southeast Asia has so many languages, and we wanted the artists to be comfortable with responding to the prompts that we're giving them. And so we've asked them to respond in whatever language they're comfortable in. I mean, the majority are responding in English, but maybe a third are responding in their own language. So we have Khmer, we have Thai, we have, I can't remember, Bahasa Malaysia. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
And I also heard Krystina share with me after she will relocate in London in August, right? She's going to do a kind of private home museum with Southeast Asian artists, and she really willing to introduce those artists to Europe audience, to the UK collectors. I think this is really something we're really glad to see that, and that's, yeah, will make a lot.
Well, it is, because I don't know what your experience is like, Tina, but when I go back after 23 years, every summer I go back to England, and everybody says, how is it in Singapore? And I say, fabulous. And they say, oh, you know, where is it? And I say, well, if you look on the map, you can see very clearly where Singapore is. And they say, what part of China? And, you know, I don't know if it's the same for you, but that's been my experience. And so what that tells me is that there still is a little bit of haziness about where is Southeast Asia, how many countries, and they don't know much about ASEAN and its importance, etc. And so I just want to maybe share that a little bit with them.
Yeah, personally, I feel I really truly understand what Krystina's feeling, because I've been relocated to Singapore from Beijing 10 years already, and I really appreciate what Singapore, this beautiful country, has offered to me and my family. So to running a gallery, maybe it's not the best business in Singapore, but this is the best way I can imagine to really give it back at some point. Because here, if you want to live in here for long term, we definitely need art, cultural, and these exciting stories behind. This just makes you feel you want to live here for long term and with your family, with your children. I think for educational purpose, this is also something very inspiring. I wish the kids would be hearing about what Krystina has been shared and also being inspired from it. Yeah, and I have one more question. Maybe because I can see some emerging collectors here with us today, maybe you can share some of the tips, not tips, like advices. Yeah,
yeah.
I know it's a very common question, but please, from your perspective.
I do have a lot of advice, actually, and it's all about having a chum. Go and see as much art as you can and mix it up. Don't just go to galleries. I mean, yes, go to galleries, go to any exhibition, go to institutes, but the biennales, all of these art fairs, I'm sorry, the expo, everything. I mean, these things are so fascinating. Most of them are easily accessible. And unlike the reputation that most people have about white cube spaces, they're very friendly. They're very friendly and welcoming. And look, you have somebody like Audrey welcoming you. And it is nice if you know the rules, such as the fact that there are no rules, and you can come, you can learn, you can enjoy. So that's what I would say. The other thing is, I just do a little bit of a promotion for women artists. Whenever you go to a new gallery, just ask them one question. By the way, how many women artists do you represent? It's an innocuous question, but do it. Because they will say something, but they might say, oh, I don't know, I never thought about it. And that little question will just make them think about it a little bit. That's all I ask you to do.
Wow, I feel so glad when you mentioned about this point. I'm looking at my wall, and literally even in this room, we have half of artists are female. Yeah, like we have Octora Chan portrait here, which is a very precious work and on loan from an artist, a collector. We have Miss Han Sai Po and Louis Bourgeois. Have conversation behind you. Yeah, and we also have Ling Xing Xing, who is also a Singapore female artist, have been so talented in different areas. Yeah, we also have this called Stranger's Vision, which is the so-called biopolitical art. She's using DNA and 3D print techniques to make faces. Yeah, it's a very interesting story behind it. And Heather, the American artist, she's also a female. So even in this small room, oh, and of course we have Octora here with us. So we feel very lucky to know these artists and to present their works. Yeah, and you sure you don't have any questions or feedback? I think it's a good chance to share something. Maybe you can introduce yourself a bit and share more. Yes, please.
Thank you so much. Beautiful presentation. I loved it. I'm curious to know. I live in Melbourne, Australia, and you made a reference of a few of the artists who now live in Australia. When we live in Australia, I find that immigration is very difficult. And I just wonder why Australia.
Maybe Alessandra can tell us, because I don't know the answer to that, but it's true that a lot of artists, Southeast Asian and otherwise, make Australia their home. They seem to be welcome there, and Berlin.
Education is one of the factors. Education. Both that you mentioned that moved, they went to further their education, to do the MA and the PhDs, and they end up staying. So at least those that I know that moved.
Yeah. So I don't know the answer to that, but I'm sorry?
More freedom, more space.
Yeah, yeah.
And particularly more space. It's very hard to find studio space.
Yes, the cost of studios, yeah.
Oh, I think some guests are leaving. Maybe before you
Bye.
can take a group photo. It's very, the first talk in our gallery, and we want to make a memory of it. Yeah, maybe Krystina, you can sit in the middle.
Sure.
And Mark, where are you, Mark? Please sit in the front. And everyone sit.
Are you coming?